first of all, congratulations on the film. It's
Oh, thank you.
a very funny, really well done film.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Um, so we have some questions about your latest film, The Death of Stalin.
Yeah.
So this is one of the world's most infamous dictators, right?
Yes.
So how does the idea emerge to make a political satire and a dark comedy about a character like him?
Well, it was a number of things. I mean, I was thinking of doing something about a fictional dictator, contemporary fictional dictator, and I hadn't worked out whether it should be a comedy or just a straight drama or a bit of both, because things were happening in democracies all around the world. Mavericks were being elected, and people were coming to power, and then changing the constitution to get more power and all that. And I thought there's something rather disturbing happening generally. And then the French graphic novel, The Death of Stalin, was sent to me, and they said, we want to make this as a film, and we think you would be the perfect person to make it. And I read it, and what immediately attracted to me was it was terrifying, and yet it was funny. It was absurd, and yet it was like horrific, and it was true. A lot of it is based on true events, and so instantly I thought, well, that's it. That's the story, because it happened. So I'll do this. And this was like 2 years ago, really. And I think I'm glad I did, because it's there really as a sort of thing to tell people that, this is what happens when democracy disappears and freedom disappears. You end up in this absurd situation where people live or die at the behest of one person.
Right.
And let's not let this happen again.
And I think a lot of Europeans do have a history and some kind of connection to that, either personally or by proxy.
Absolutely, yes. And also, just a little thing that made the difference was it was a European story. Having done 4 or 5 years of American politics, I kind of wanted to come back and make a European movie,
Right.
in terms of the subject matter and the tone of it and so on. And it was Gaumont, the French studio, fully funded it, and so it was a proper European film, even though it has some American actors in it. And I felt that was important, because it's there's something going on in Europe at the moment that I think connects with the themes in the film.
Well, you mentioned that the script is based on this graphic novel, The Death of Stalin, and I want to ask you about that. What were some of the challenges in transforming something like a graphic novel into a full feature? And, what challenges do you have making the actual film?
Well, a lot of it was, I mean, I wanted to keep in the film what it was about the graphic novel that attracted me in the first place. I wanted to keep that tone and that inspiration. What I decided I didn't want to do was have a look that looked like a graphic novel but on screen, so it had to be completely different, because it's a different medium. And in a graphic novel there isn't much dialogue, so I knew I had to fill 100 minutes with new dialogue. But I tried to keep as much of the events in the novel on screen, because the graphic novel and the film open with this concert where Stalin asks for a recording and there isn't a recording, and they go out in the streets and they get the audience back in, and they get the orchestra back in, and the conductor falls over and falls unconscious, and they have to get another conductor in the middle of the night, and he does it in his pajamas, and that's a true story. That's the thing. That's all true. And what I thought also was, do more research, go out to Moscow, look at the places, look at Stalin's dacha, look at the Kremlin, try and replicate that as much as possible. And then I knew that the funeral was going to be the big backdrop to the movie, so all the events have to take place during the funeral, whereas in the graphic novel it takes place over about 3 or 4 months. So that was the big difference. But as much as possible, trying to keep to the tone. And the writers and the artists, they love the film, and they're very happy. And it means the whole back catalogue is now out in English as well as French. So they're very pleased.
Well, I believe this is also, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is the first time that you write a screenplay which is based on previous work, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yes. And also on historic events. It's the first time I've done something set in another period.
Correct. Yeah.
Which gives you your own challenges. But as I say, if you do a lot of research and preparation, and a lot of it is about finding out the truth, really, and putting that in the film.
Hmm.
You know, we found out that Stalin's son Vasily was in charge of the national Air Force ice
Yeah, the
hockey
hockey
team,
team. Yeah.
and he lost them all in a plane crash. He insisted they fly during a storm. The plane crashed, and he covered it up. He couldn't. He was too scared to tell his father he'd lost the national team, so he got friends and friends of friends to become the new team, and they were terrible.
Wow. Feels like that would somehow surface after a while.
Well, it did, but it was long after Stalin's death. You know,
It's.
and you read stories like that, and you think it's sort of tragic, and yet it's strangely funny as well, and you know, it's absurd. That's it. It's sort of absurd.
Well, it's perfect for satire. I wanted to ask you because we have a lot of filmmakers watching the show and the channel. As a screenwriter, what do you feel what are the challenges? What's easier and what is harder to adapt some other material?
Well, the challenge is, I think you have to be confident. You can't be. I think sometimes adaptations fail if they're too reverential to the original. If they're just trying to replicate the original on screen. And, you know, film is a whole new medium, and therefore you have to think in that whole new medium. You have to think about the music and the color and the movement and the performance, you know, and I think actually you'll get an inferior work if you're actually too reverential that the process is just about taking this page and turning it into that scene, and then this page and turning it into that scene. And we're doing another adaptation at the moment. I'm about to shoot in the summer a film adaptation of Charles Dickens' novel, David Copperfield. And again, I'm trying to be as authentic as possible to the book, but at the same time, I'm having to change stories, really, to make them work as a film, you know, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because Dickens wrote very episodically. He published in monthly installments. So it's very episodic.
That was actually one of my questions, like what your next project was. That's so interesting. This is a very famous and very known story that's been made into film several times. Can we expect the Iannucci satirical political treatment of this as well?
Not necessarily political, but you know, it's about society, but it's about someone growing up in being affected by the world around. It's a very modern novel. It's about someone who uses memories of a terrible childhood to write and to turn into fiction. David Copperfield becomes a famous writer, but his personal life is a mess. He makes the wrong decisions about his friends and his relationships, and him realizing that the real world is much more difficult to manage than the imagined world. And that's a very modern. There's a character in it called Mr. Dick who's actually mentally ill, and it's the first proper treatment of mental illness in a novel in English. So it's a very contemporary, and you say it's a very famous book, but if you ask anyone what is the story of David Copperfield, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you. They might say, you know, there's a Mr. Micawber is in it, or Uriah Heep is in it, but that's about it.
Right. I agree. You think of the magician probably in the Western world now. It's like David Copperfield, doesn't he do magic?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is not him.
Exactly. It's the other guy. Yeah.
The other guy.
That's so great. So thanks for sharing that with us. Going back to the Death of Stalin, the film is wonderfully acted, really well directed, and the cast is just stellar.
Yeah, thank you.
So what we really liked about the film, you know, one of many things, was that you allowed Brits to really be Brits and speak in their own dialects and in their own voices, instead of having these, fake Russian accents.
Absolutely. I did a session with the Russian press in the day that, you know, they were allowed to watch the film and the film was going to be released. They all watched it and they loved it, but they said thank you for not using fake Russian accents because we hate that. But also the thinking was that in the Kremlin at the time, you know, this was a big empire, the Soviet Union. Stalin was from Georgia, not Russia, so he spoke Georgian. Khrushchev was from Ukraine, and so there were many accents and dialects. So if I'm going to do it in English, it should be English in an array of different English and American accents, really.
Right, exactly. Which kind of segues into my question about Steve Buscemi, who's the American of the gang. I'm sure there's some other American actors as well, but I mean in the Central Committee, he sort of stands out, and he's also brilliant in his portrayal of Nikita Khrushchev, by the way. But he's one of the odd one out. But you kind of answered the question because he is actually from, even though I believe Ukraine is similar in Russian to Russian.
Yes, they can sort of speak each other's thing, but it has its own history and its own culture, and is seen as a sort of agrarian, farm. It's all to do with farming and the land and so on. So there's Khrushchev, who saw himself as being looked down upon by the intellectuals in the party, and he's very voluble because Beria in the film is still and contained. So his opponent, I wanted to be, voluble, and I said to Steve, he's almost Italian because he speaks with his hands the way Italians do all the time, and so it's about getting a variety, and also I wanted people with different acting backgrounds. So some have done television, some have done stage. Simon Russell Beale is really a stage performer. We've got people like Michael Palin from who has a sort of Python background and so on, and just a variety of acting backgrounds and styles. So it didn't feel like everyone was speaking with one voice.
Right.
There was actually lots of different voices.
Yeah, and that actually answers my question that I had about casting in your casting process, because movies feel like they live and die on casting, and for people who are actors like myself, for example, it's hard to understand sometimes the mosaic which is casting, and how you fit into that puzzle.
That's right.
And I think you spoke to that very well right now.
And thank you. And also, I don't think, say you have 12 characters, I don't think you can cast them all at the same time. Because, some might say no, some might not be available, You've kind of got to know what the mix is. You said it's a puzzle. It is. It's like you find the first piece, and then you find the next piece that you think will match it. And then you go and find the third piece that will match those two, and you work out like that. So it should be a more considered process and a longer process.
I see, yeah.
And I like to do it early as well, so that we know who we're writing for and we can adjust the script with them in mind.
That's a really interesting point that you're... Can I ask who was the first piece?
Oh, it was Beria.
It was Beria.
Okay. Simon Russell Beale is Beria. So there you go, and then you go out to Khrushchev, and then Malenkov, and then Molotov, and then you get the children in, and I like to cast someone knowing who it is as much as possible that they are going to be acting with,
right?
To see if they are sufficiently different or a sufficient contrast, or if they're trying to be like someone, if they're sufficiently like someone, it's that really.
Right, with the chemistry. That's really important. So let us address the elephant in the room that we sort of touched upon with the Russian press day. So the film has been banned in Russia, effectively. What are your thoughts and feelings about that?
Well, I don't know. At the time, as we were making it, I was wondering whether it would ever be shown in Russia. And actually, it got a license. It was up till about 4 days ago. It had been screened and shown and granted a license and was dubbed and ready to go. And then there was one screening in the Kremlin or in the Culture Ministry that changed everything. And I think there's a nervousness about it. But actually, one cinema went ahead and showed it anyway. And the audience applauded at the end, came out and said to the press, look, we don't have a problem with this. It's a funny film. It's true. It makes fun of the politicians, but it doesn't make fun of the people. It's very respectful. It's very honest about what happened to the people at the time. So it does make me still optimistic that maybe when the dust has settled, we might be able to get it. The thing is, it's out there now. That's it. Everyone's now heard about it, and they will find it. So they might as well do it correctly.
Right. And we sort of live in these times as well. We have this, bless you, we have this Swedish film, the Nile Hilton incident, which is set in Egypt, but isn't allowed to be screened in Egypt.
Right, there we go. I mean, that's what happens, and it's a shame because it's not like we're saying that people have to watch it. If you don't like the subject matter, don't go and see the film. Right. If you're interested in the subject matter, go and see the film. And even when you see the film, you don't have to like it. You can hate it if you like. That's allowed. There's no obligation. So, what's the problem?
That's very true. That is very true. So going back to you a bit, it's you have a long and successful career in making. I would say, to me, you're. I know you for your political satire, which is really good, and you have several Emmys and BAFTAs to prove it. So you have these hugely successful films like In the Loop, which is one of my mom's favorite films actually,
Okay,
and
good.
also the show VEEP, which is big here
Yeah,
in Sweden like everywhere else.
yeah.
I want to ask you a question which pertains to this certain anxiousness which is surrounding right now. You know, some kind of political correctness, like what you can and can't say, what you can and can't joke about, paired at the same time with the seemingly unfiltered tweets of politicians around the
Oh,
globe.
absolutely. I'm always nervous of anyone who says you can't say this and you can't say that. I think, especially for comedy, no subject is off limits. But what I'd say is, if you're going to make a comedy based on a sensitive subject, you have to work hard. You have to get it right. You know, you have to work out what is it you're trying to say, what is the effect that you're trying to have, what are the points of view you're trying to show. I don't think a subject is belittled by being made the subject of a comedy. Comedy allows you to look at it from a completely new angle. But I do think you have to be, you have to do the work. You know, you have to work harder.
Right.
So, of course, nothing is off limits, but that doesn't mean to say that people can therefore just say anything, you know, racist or offensive or whatever, and go, oh, it's just a joke. I think that's lazy.
Right.
And I think you can joke about stuff, but you have to work hard if you're going to do that.
Right, and I agree with that. So, but my question was really: is political satire, has it become easier or harder to write because of?
Well, you see, I am relieved that I don't have to do a show set in the American political system at the moment, because I don't think any fictional version of what's happening is any funnier or more absurd than what really is happening. You know, because Trump is his own. He's an entertainer. He's interested in ratings. That's what he's interested in. He's doing the State of the Union today, and I'm sure he'll tweet about the ratings tomorrow, or the popularity polls and so on. That's what he's his own satirist, really. So there's no real room for us.
That sounds so sad for writers. Of course, there are other stories to tell.
Yeah.
Going back to politics, I saw an interview with you on the BBC, and you were speaking about how you want to get young people involved in politics and interested. And also there was this, you know, how to combat fake news, and this is a big thing now in Sweden because we have an election year this year.
Yes.
So the other day, the American entrepreneur Mark Cuban said on social media that he thinks every social media account should be verified by Twitter and Facebook. In this way to you know, stop the troll accounts from taking over. However, the immediate response from some people was, if you do that, if you verify every account and, you know, ask people to verify their own info, then that would also kill the anonymity and also the chance to speak out, or, you know, maybe inform about international political issues. What is your take on that?
Well, my take is that, you know, Facebook and Google get all the money, so they're publishers, and it may be that they don't necessarily have to verify every account, but they should verify every piece of information. You know, they can't say, we're happy to take the money, but it's unfortunate if someone posts a Nazi opinion or a racist opinion, or it shows you how to make a bomb or how to commit suicide. That's nothing to do with us. It's everything to do with them, because they're getting the money. And they're not just a platform, they're a publication, really. So, you know, and publications can print anonymous content, but they just need to verify the content. Not necessarily they can protect their source, but they need to verify their content. And I would just like to see Facebook and Google and all these content providers basically spend more of their billions on making sure that what's going up online is true, if it claims to be true.
Thank you so much, Mr. Iannucci, and good luck with the Gothenburg Film Festival and with the rest of the film's premieres.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for giving us your time.
Thank you. No problem.